1. What is government in American democracy, and how can the concept be understood? Government in American democracy refers to the system through which laws are made, enforced, and interpreted. It is a structure that organizes and allocates power within society, ensuring order and providing services to the population. In the U.S., government is based on democratic principles that allow citizens to have a role in decision-making through representation, elections, and constitutional rights. The government operates on principles of separation of powers among three branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. 2. What phases in the development of American democracy can we distinguish? American democracy has evolved through several phases. Colonial and early republic phase 1600s 1787, influenced by European political thought. The colonies established early democratic principles with town hall meetings and representative assemblies. Constitutional foundation 1787-1789, the drafting and ratification of the Constitution, including debates between Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Expansion of rights 1800s 1960s, the Civil War, Reconstruction amendments, and civil rights movements expanded the franchise and rights to various groups. Modern developments 1960s present. Legislative changes and Supreme Court rulings have further refined civil rights, voting rights, and the overall scope of democracy. 3. What do we mean when we say that democracy is a process? Democracy as a process implies that it is not a static state but an ongoing mechanism of participation, debate, reform, and change. This process involves citizens engaging in elections, policy discussions, advocacy, and adjustments to laws and practices to better reflect the will and needs of the population. 4. What is a constitutional democracy? A constitutional democracy is a form of government where the authority of the majority is limited by a constitution that guarantees the rights of individuals and minorities. It ensures that democratic principles coexist with rule of law, protecting citizens from potential tyranny. 5. What is the difference between plurality rule and majority rule? Plurality rule: the candidate with the most votes wins, even if they do not achieve more than 50% of the votes. Majority rule: the candidate must secure more than 50% of the votes to win, ensuring that the winner has broader support. 6. What are the core values of the American Creed? The American Creed emphasizes core values such as liberty, equality, individualism, democracy, and the rule of law. These values serve as the ideological foundation for American society and its political system. 7. How can the idea of equality be understood? Equality can be understood as equal access to opportunities, legal protections, and rights regardless of race, gender, socioeconomic status, or other characteristics. It involves both formal equality, equal treatment under the law, and substantive equality, actual opportunities and outcomes that reflect fairness. 8. What is the role of conflict in American democracy? Conflict plays a necessary role in American democracy by allowing for the expression of differing opinions, debate, and the contestation of ideas. It ensures that power is not concentrated and that policies evolve through scrutiny. However, excessive or destructive conflict can undermine democratic institutions. 9. Where is conflict necessary and good, and where is it counterproductive for the system? Conflict is good when it leads to policy innovation, reform, and increased accountability. It becomes counterproductive when it fosters division, gridlock, or violence, preventing effective governance or harming public trust. 10. How do you understand the concept of liberal democracy? Liberal democracy is a form of government characterized by free and fair elections, protection of individual rights, and the rule of law. It emphasizes not only majority rule but also safeguarding individual liberties against majority tyranny. 11. What is the relationship between diversity and democracy? Diversity enriches democracy by bringing varied perspectives, experiences, and ideas, which can lead to more comprehensive and representative decision-making. However, managing diversity requires inclusive policies and respect for minority rights to prevent divisions. 12. Are liberty and freedom synonymous? While often used interchangeably, liberty generally refers to the absence of undue restrictions or interference from the government or others, focusing on personal autonomy. Freedom can be broader, encompassing the state of being free from constraints, which may include social or economic barriers. 13. What are the documents upon which the U.S. Constitution 1787 is based? The Constitution was influenced by Magna Carta 1215, established the principle that the king was subject to the law. The English Bill of Rights 1689 inspired ideas of parliamentary supremacy and individual rights. The Articles of Confederation served as the first national framework, highlighting the need for a stronger central government. Political writings of Montesquieu introduced the separation of powers. 14. How did the Pilgrim Fathers contribute to American democracy? The Pilgrim Fathers contributed to the idea of self-governance and the social contract through the Mayflower Compact 1620, which set a precedent for collective decision-making and rule by consent. 15. What would be the philosophical foundations of American democracy? The philosophical foundations include John Locke's theories on natural rights, life, liberty, and property, and the social contract. Montesquieu's ideas on the separation of powers. Jean-Jacques Rousseau's emphasis on general will and popular sovereignty. 16. What visions of human nature collided at the Constitutional Convention in 1787? The delegates debated between a view of human nature as inherently cooperative and rational versus a more skeptical view that people are self-interested and need checks to prevent corruption and abuse of power. 17. What are the most specific features of the American democratic system? These include the separation of powers, checks and balances, federalism, representative democracy, and a written constitution. 18. What are the features which American democracy shares with most other democracies? Features include regular, free elections, a constitution or legal framework, representative government, and mechanisms for protecting civil rights and liberties. 19. What are functions of government according to the Founding Fathers? The Founding Fathers outlined functions such as protecting individual rights, maintaining order, providing for the common defense, and promoting the general welfare. 20. How does the structure of government reflect the culture of the community? The structure reflects American values of individualism, separation of powers, and a balance between federal and state authority, mirroring a culture that prioritizes liberty and regional diversity. 21. What circumstances led to the creation of American constitutions? The shortcomings of the Articles of Confederation, economic instability, interstate disputes, and the threat of foreign powers prompted the drafting of the U.S. Constitution. 22. What is the relationship between the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution 1787? The Declaration of Independence 1776 set forth the philosophical justification for separation from Britain, emphasizing rights and equality. The Constitution 1787 established the framework for governance, embedding these ideals into practical structures. 23. What was the main rationale for the Articles of Confederation (ALC)? The ALC aimed to create a loose alliance of states with limited central power, reflecting fears of a strong, centralized government similar to British rule. 24. What did the FF want to avoid when they designed the ALC? And what did they encourage? The founders wanted to avoid a powerful central authority and encourage state sovereignty. However, this led to weaknesses such as a lack of tax enforcement and military power. 25. What is the difference between confederal, federal, and unitary forms of government? Confederal power resides with state or regional governments. Federal power is divided between national and subnational governments. Unitary power is concentrated in a central government. 26. Why is Daniel Shays important for the Constitution 1787? Daniel Shays led Shays' Rebellion 1786-1787, highlighting the weaknesses of the ALC and pushing for reforms that led to the Constitutional Convention. 27. How is the 1787 Constitution a reflection of compromise? The Constitution incorporated compromises such as the Great Compromise balancing representation in Congress and the 3/5 Compromise counting slaves for representation. 28. What did the FF want to avoid when they designed the Constitution, and what did they encourage? They wanted to avoid excessive centralized power and the tyranny of the majority. They encouraged a system of checks and balances, limited government, and protections for individual rights. 29. What are the main ideas of Federalists and Anti-Federalists? What ideas did they share? Federalists supported a strong central government. Anti-Federalists feared it would erode state power and individual liberties. Both shared the belief in a need for a strong national framework, but differed on how much power it should hold. 30. How does the Constitution cater to the needs of ordinary people? Through provisions like the Bill of Rights, the Constitution guarantees freedoms that protect individuals from government overreach and promotes democratic participation. 31. How does the Constitution cater to the needs of the elites? It protects property rights and includes mechanisms such as the Electoral College and the Senate to ensure that less populous states have significant representation. 32. How does the Constitution reflect the selfish character of human nature? Madisonian dilemma. James Madison believed that human nature was self-interested and needed structures. To here are the answers and explanations to the first half of your questions, providing context and relevant detail for each. 33. What was the role of James Madison at the Constitutional Convention? James Madison, known as the father of the Constitution, was a principal architect and influential figure in drafting the U.S. Constitution. He proposed the Virginia Plan, which called for a strong central government and served as a blueprint for the final document. His writings in the Federalist Papers helped advocate for ratification and outline key constitutional principles, such as the separation of powers and checks and balances. 34. What are the basic premises of the system of checks and balances? Checks and balances are a system that ensures no single branch of government becomes too powerful. Each branch, executive, legislative, and judicial, has the authority to check the powers of the other branches. For instance, the president can veto legislation, Congress can override that veto, and the Supreme Court can rule laws unconstitutional. This system maintains a balance of power that safeguards democratic governance. 35. What role did Montesquieu's ideas play in the design of the Constitution? Montesquieu's work, particularly his book The Spirit of the Laws, profoundly influenced the Constitution's design. His ideas emphasized the importance of separating government powers into distinct branches to prevent tyranny. This concept led to the establishment of the legislative, executive, and judicial branches, each with defined powers and responsibilities, ensuring that one branch could not dominate the others. 36. What are the advantages and disadvantages of a bicameral legislature? A bicameral legislature, like the U.S. Congress, Senate, and House of Representatives, has advantages and disadvantages. Advantages: ensures diverse representation, different interests can be considered. Acts as a check on hasty legislation through the review process in the second chamber. Disadvantages: can lead to legislative gridlock when both chambers disagree. Complexity and inefficiency in passing laws. 37. Why did the FF design the House and the Senate differently? The Great Compromise led to the design of a bicameral legislature, with the House representing the population proportionally and the Senate ensuring equal representation for all states. This approach balanced the interests of populous states and smaller states, addressing disputes during the Constitutional Convention. 38. What are the advantages and disadvantages of the separation between the presidency and Congress? Advantages: provides a system of checks and balances that prevents any one branch from dominating. Promotes policy debate and compromise between branches. Disadvantages: can lead to conflicts and legislative gridlock when the branches are controlled by different parties. May reduce policy efficiency and response times. 39. What are the basic differences between the ALC and the C? The Articles of Confederation ALC were the first governing document, emphasizing state sovereignty with a weak central government. The Constitution established a stronger federal government with clearer powers divided among branches. Key differences include power distribution. The ALC gave states most of the power. The Constitution centralized power. Federal authority. The ALC lacked the power to tax or regulate trade, while the Constitution granted these powers. Legislative structure. The ALC had a unicameral legislature. The Constitution established a bicameral Congress. 40. What made the FF introduce such changes, and how did they explain them to the public? The Founding Fathers were influenced by the weaknesses of the ALC, such as economic instability, inability to tax, and lack of national unity. They explained these changes through the Federalist Papers, authored primarily by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay, emphasizing the need for a stronger central government to maintain order and protect liberty. 41. Why was the process of ratification so difficult? The ratification process was difficult due to concerns about centralized power. Some feared that a strong central government could become tyrannical. Lack of Bill of Rights. Many believed the Constitution needed explicit protections for individual liberties. Regional interests. Different states had varying economic interests and concerns that complicated consensus. 42. What was the role of the Federalist Papers in the process of ratification of the Constitution? The Federalist Papers were a series of 85 essays advocating for the ratification of the Constitution, written by Hamilton, Madison, and Jay under the pseudonym Publius. These essays explained and defended the proposed Constitution, addressing anti-federalist concerns and illustrating the necessity of a stronger national government. 43. What are the antecedents of the Bill of Rights? BOR. The BOR was influenced by the English Bill of Rights 1689, which limited the powers of the monarchy and affirmed certain individual rights. State constitutions, many of which already included provisions protecting rights. The Virginia Declaration of Rights 1776, drafted by George Mason, which outlined fundamental rights. 44. How is the BOR a check on government? The Bill of Rights acts as a check on government by enumerating individual rights that the government cannot infringe upon. These rights include freedom of speech, religion, and the right to due process. This ensures that the government must respect personal freedoms and limit its power. 45. What is the difference between fragmentation of powers and separation of powers, if there is? Separation of powers refers to the division of government powers among distinct branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. Fragmentation of powers refers to dividing powers within the same level of government, such as federal versus state authority in the U.S. system. While related, separation focuses on different branches, and fragmentation emphasizes the distribution between federal and state levels. 46. What are the main premises of American federalism reflected in the Constitution with amendments? The Constitution establishes federalism by dividing powers between national and state governments, specifying certain powers to the federal government, for example, defense, foreign affairs, allowing states to retain powers not specifically reserved for the federal government. The 10th Amendment reinforces this by stating that powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved for the states. 47. What is the consequence of the fact that congressional powers are enumerated and presidential powers are not? Enumerated powers for Congress provide clear limitations on its authority, while the presidency's implied powers allow for adaptability in times of crisis. This can lead to disputes about the extent of presidential power and the potential for executive overreach. 48. Why do you think a convention method has never been used when the Constitution was amended? The convention method has never been used because it carries the risk of uncontrollable changes to the Constitution. The last time it was considered, it was feared that such a convention could lead to a complete rewrite rather than targeted amendments. 49. Why and how are constitutional amendments adopted? Amendments can be proposed by 2/3 of both houses of Congress. A convention called by 2/3 of state legislatures never used. Amendments are ratified by 3/4 of state legislatures or conventions, and 3/4 of the states use once. For the 21st Amendment. 50. What is the difference between the originalist and progressive interpretation of the Constitution? Originalist interpretation views the Constitution's meaning as fixed at the time it was written. Progressive interpretation sees it as a living document, adaptable to contemporary contexts and evolving societal values. 51. How significant is the principle of judicial review for the effectiveness of American democracy? Judicial review, established by Marbury v. Madison 1803, is critical for ensuring that laws and government actions comply with the Constitution. It acts as a safeguard against unconstitutional practices and helps maintain the rule of law. 52. How does the Constitution change its meaning except through amendments? The Constitution's meaning can change through judicial interpretation via Supreme Court rulings and legislative actions that redefine its application. This reflects shifts in societal values and legal precedents that modify the understanding of constitutional principles without formal amendments.